Hey everybody, and welcome to the Grumpy and Shadow Show.
I'm Grumpy,
And I'm Shadow.
and today we're going to discuss the Flash season premiere on the CW network. So let's get to it.
Okay, so at the end of season 2, we left off with Barry traveling back in time to save his mom.
So about 3 months have passed, and Barry saved his mother, keeping his family together, and imprisoned the Reverse Flash in a speed-damp cell.
Now, I personally probably would have killed the guy myself. I mean, you know that if you don't, at least the way I feel, if you don't kill him and somehow he escapes, you're going to have to go through this all over again. And and keep repeating the same thing. I personally probably would have killed him, but then, to me, the whole thing with Barry went back, saved his mom, and then I'm assuming, because they didn't show it, that he then went forward in time to when he would have been the age that he is in the regular timeline.
Maybe he didn't kill him because maybe he needed him in the future.
Well,
I don't know.
You got to figure that when Barry went back in time to kill his mom, that timeline Barry was only 11 years old. So he had to travel forward in time to the time that he was actually the age that he went back in time. I know it's confusing. And then what would have happened to the other Barry? So there's a lot of things that they left out and a few plot holes that are in there that really should have been filled in. And I think that was just an oversight on the writer's part, that they were rushing to get the Flashpoint story as basic as they could without getting into all the minor details. And, we're kind of left with, it is what it is, what happened, is what happened, which, some people may not understand and some people may be confused about, but in the long run, I think it'll all pay off.
Maybe will. And Barry stalks Iris in a not a creepy way, but he notices in the newscast he sees the other Flash in his timeline. And Barry, using his speed, he also keeps up with the new Flash.
Yeah, and I noticed that Barry sped out of that Jitter's coffee shop, and I could have sworn that the people that were sitting by the door saw him go, saw this whole thing, this blur right past them. And to me, he is using his speed for nonsensical things, like he's going just to sightsee, just to watch the new Flash in action, and he's not doing anything about it. He's basically enjoying the fact that he's not the Flash. I mean, he's a speedster, but he's not the Flash, and the responsibility isn't on him to keep the city safe. And I think that that's one of the reasons why he's so intrigued with the new Flash, or with this different Flash. If you notice that the Flash of that timeline, his uniform, outfit, costume, whatever you want to call it, strongly resembles that of the Kid Flash from the comics. Although he's not known as the Kid Flash, Barry does make a reference to him being the Kid Flash, and what happens?
He says, "I'm the Flash." He don't want to be referenced as the Kid Flash. He wants to be the Flash.
He doesn't want to be known as the second banana. He wants to be the one and only Flash. Right, he wants to be known as the Flash. And Barry, at this point, doesn't want to stand in his way.
But one of the encounters with the Flash, a rival, Barry found out who the Flash is. And with that said, Barry wants to help Wally become a better Flash. And he follows Wally to the base of operations, finds out Irish is working with Wally. Meantime, Joe West is heavily on the sauce and relationship with his daughter, and Joe has kind of dwindled away.
Right, right. And that's one of the first signs that this new timeline is different. Um, the fact that Iris knows who the Flash is from the get go, and that she's in tight with her brother, and that Dad is no longer the ace detective that he was in the first comic, in the first few seasons. He's now basically a drunk, and someone who's neglecting his family, his work, and with Barry finding out where Flash is, that Flash is Wally, and going to his base of operations, he tries to explain to Wally that he too is the Flash, and that he has a better way for him to deal with the rival. Now, Wally doesn't take too kindly to that. He doesn't like people telling him what to do. He's still a kid. He's still a kid. He's still, growing into his own. And, like any teenager, they don't want to be told what to do. I didn't want to be told what to do. Did you?
Hell no.
No. And for someone to come up and say, hey, you're doing a great job, but you're doing it all wrong. Let me show you how to do it. It's kind of insulting, especially since he's been carrying the mantle all by himself, all this time. So Barry goes to Iris, and they have this conversation that was perfect for that scene. And that was the conversation where he convinces her that he's from another timeline. And it doesn't take much convincing because she felt the connection. She felt from the get-go, she knew that there was something going on more than them just liking each other, that there was some weird bond between
She didn't know exactly what it was, but she could feel it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's when she turns around to Wally and basically says, dude, listen to him. He's the Flash. He knows what he's saying. And, that was an interesting exchange.
Okay, then we have learned that the Teen Flash has dramatically changed. Of course, we know Joe is heavily on the sauce, and the Cisco is the richest man in America. Caitlin is an eye doctor for the Rugrats, and there's no sign of Dr. Wells, so who knows where the heck he is right now. And, so Barry tries to reform Team Flash to help Wally. Because of Wally's ego, while working with Barry, he gets seriously injured. So Barry realizes his mistake and that he must go back in time with the help of the Reverse Flash, allowing his mother to be killed again and his father back in jail.
Yeah, that whole thing with Wally being seriously injured while they were taking on the rival, Barry didn't realize how much of an impact just changing the one thing for himself would make on any timeline or on anyone's future. And I think that seeing the damage that he's done to not only to his relationship with Iris, but also to the fact that Wally is the Flash, and Wally is an unexperienced Flash or inexperienced Flash, causing him to become be susceptible to that kind of injury. Plus the fact that knowing that he's running around using the Speed Force is taking away from Wally's use of the Speed Force to heal himself. He realizes what a big mistake that was. Now, the one good thing I think that came out of that whole exchange was that when Joe sees Wally, he immediately forgets about the drinking and the problems, and he runs right to his son's side. Now, thank God, if it wasn't for Joe, who knows what would have happened, because Joe pulled out his pea shooter and, put a nice little hole in the rival, stopping that whole thing. But if that hadn't happened, no one knows where things would have led to, where things would have gone to. Barry had no choice but to pull the reverse flash of the speed dampening cell that he had and basically beg him to kill his mom, which fed, of course, the reverse flash's ego.
Yeah, when Barry goes back in time, he landed in time that he wasn't expecting. I think he didn't know that at first, but then he found out that Irish and Joe weren't talking. My God, I thought she was dead at first.
Oh, I know the way they were talking when he came in and he said, where's Iris? And they're like, what are you being funny? And, that's not funny and so on. And I was thinking, oh my God, somehow she's dead. What happened to her?
It's like, oh, they're not talking. Okay, that's relief. And we find out that the rival gets a creepy mirror message from the Dr. Alchemy.
Yeah, with that whole thing was interesting because the rival in the first timeline when we first started that episode, he was shot by Joe. Then we come back to the new timeline that Barry just created again. He's alive, happily in bed with his girlfriend, his wife, whoever, and he hears his name being called, goes up and sees Alchemy being scratched into the mirror, what it looks like from the inside, which only means one thing, if you ask me. It means that for some reason, Dr. Alchemy and the Mirror Master are working together, or at least for this instance, the Mirror Master is relaying a message for Dr. Alchemy to the rival. My guess is to somehow awaken the speed force in him. Now, the whole thing with Joe and Iris not talking, I can only assume, because they haven't gotten into it yet, I can only assume that it has to do with Iris's mom leaving Joe. And it's possible that maybe Joe blames Iris for the whole thing. But again, that's another plot hole that they didn't get into. We do learn that Harrison Wells, or a version of Harrison Wells, will be on episode 2.
Now, I know Dr. Wells hasn't been cited in this episode, but could it be really on the sideline someplace?
Well, we know that he's going to be, or a version of him is going to be in episode 2. Whether that's the Harrison Wells from Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, or somewhere else in the multiverse, that remains to be seen. It seems like during the preview for episode 2, his personality is different than that of Earth 1 and Earth 2 Dr. Wells. So where does this other Wells come from? Could he come from the Earth that Supergirl is from? Because we know that they're going to have that episode 8 crossover. I wonder if this is all leading up to that. The other thing is, we know that Jesse's going to be a speedster. Finally, we know that Jesse's going to be a speedster in the new timeline that's been established, and she is going to be Jessie Quick. The only question is, will Wally still have his speed?
Good question.
And when we left, before Barry went back in time, Wally and Jesse were hit with the new particle accelerator. And Jesse got the spark from Barry's hand when she was in the coma to bring her back to life. I'm guessing that's where she got her speed from. But did Wally get his speed because he was with Jesse at the time, or did he not get his speed and he's got some other ability? This is all going to be interesting stuff to find out in the weeks ahead. I personally think that we're up against, well, Barry's up against quite a mountain of adjustment, seeing how nothing will ever be the same again. There's no way for him to get back to that original timeline. And he's going to have to basically adapt to an entire new life.
Barry's just trying to make things perfect, but every time he tries to make it perfect, he's changing the timeline for somebody else.
Absolutely. And you know, the whole thing is one of the reasons why he decided to let the Reverse Flash go back and do what he did was because Barry's memories from the first timeline were being replaced by memories from the timeline he was on. So all his time with Iris was being erased and replaced with his recollection of seeing her in school and here and there, but never being in a big relationship with her. And he didn't want to lose any of those things that he's gone through. Along with the fact that Wally was injured and Joe's life was a mess and the whole thing, those were all the big contributing factors to him wanting to, well, not wanting to, but admitting that he made a mistake and the best course of action was to let his mom get killed again and learn to accept it for what it is. Dr. Alchemy is seen in the season, the episode 2 promo in his so-called street clothes or alter ego clothes, and he's working with Barry, which is going to be interesting to see because that's another adjustment Barry has to go through. Because when he was in the original timeline, he didn't have a partner. Now all of a sudden he's got a partner, and Joe is still being it seems that Joe is still being the Joe from the Flashpoint timeline, where he's not talking to Iris. He might be hitting the saw still. We're not sure. I mean, we did see him and Wally having a beer while they were at his house, and then when he like ran upstairs when Barry mentioned Iris, you kind of wonder what his whole personality is going to be in the upcoming weeks, and I'd like to find that out. Now we know that the Mirror Master and the Top are coming back or are coming to the Flash this season. We also know that Gorilla Grodd's coming back, and that there's going to be a big bad that we haven't seen yet, bigger than Dr. Alchemy, and I'm ready for that. The question is, are you guys ready for it? What I'd like to know is, A, what do you think is going to be the next step in Barry's evolution? Do you think that he's going to become or be the Flash in that new timeline? Or do you think that it's going to be he just got thrust into a timeline where there's a team Flash, where there's more than one speedster, where it's maybe him and Jesse and Wally all work together as a speed task force, so to speak. So I'd like to know your thoughts and opinions. You leave them in the comment section below. We'll have a nice discussion. And as always, have a good night.
And don't forget to share, like, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.